Today we'll be going over the differences and similarities between Walt Disney World and Disneyland. Hello and welcome to the Let's Go to Disney podcast. I'm Oliver.
And I'm Lucy.
Today is Sunday, February 18th, and you're listening to episode 23, Walt Disney World versus Disneyland. Before we get into today's main topic, here's what's going on in the parks right now. We had some big news drop this week. Tiana's Bayou Adventure is opening this summer.
So excited.
Yeah, this is huge news because Disney had previously announced that it would be opening in late 2024, but the Disney Parks social pages shared several videos this week showing the mural on the walls outside of the attraction, and they now say that the attraction is coming this summer. They also shared a sneak peek of the Tiana animatronic that looks amazing.
Amazing. Yeah, I was really impressed.
100%. I was as well. They will be on par with the newest technology and won't feature the projection mapping on the faces like you see at Frozen Ever After. So that'll be a nice change.
It will be, yeah.
Yeah. This is a significant change in opening timeline, and I can't wait to see what the attraction will be like. I've had a few people ask me already about a more exact timeline, but summer is as much info as we have currently, and that could be early summer, like beginning of June, or very late summer, closer to September. So that remains to be seen. Another thing that has not been announced is what the virtual queue or the individual lightning lane situation will be. Okay, so previously Splash Mountain had a standby queue and was on Genie Plus. New attractions typically have virtual queues and individual lightning lanes, so I'm curious to see what Disney will decide to do with that.
Yeah.
I suspect it will be a virtual queue and an individual lightning lane, but nobody knows that for sure. I'll keep my ear to the ground and give news as soon as it's released. Disney Parks blog released the foodie guide for the California Adventure Food and Wine Festival over on the West Coast. That will run March 1st through April 22nd. There will be 11 marketplace and kiosk locations, as well as a downtown Disney locations. The full menu items are on the Disney Parks blog website, and there are some delicious looking treats and sips, as always. The Food and Wine Festival is much shorter in DCA, right, or California Adventure than Epcot. So if you're wanting to experience that, start planning. Or you probably should have already planned it by now.
Yeah.
Disney Parks blog also finally released its foodie guide for the Flower and Garden Festival, which I'm really excited for because we've been waiting on pins and needles for that. We are heading to the festival this year, and we can't wait. Reminder that it kicks off on February 28th and will run until May 27th. Among the food booth menu items, there will be returning favorites as well as fun new eats to try as always. We'll do a full breakdown of what will be available in terms of food and beyond in next week's episode. With that said, let's get into today's main topic, Walt Disney World versus Disneyland. I've said this before on the podcast many times, but I don't like to pick the parks against each other, meaning the 4 parks in Walt Disney World against each other, the 2 parks in Disneyland against each other, or Disney World and Disneyland resorts as a whole against each other. Having said that, they are different, and I think it's important to point out the differences and similarities between them so you can potentially decide which destination you'd like to visit first, or which destination you'd like to visit next. There are some pretty strong opinions when it comes to the domestic parks. There are diehard fans of both Disneyland and Walt Disney World, but to me, really, it's like anything else. Apple and Android, PlayStation, Xbox, people will disagree on pretty much anything, okay? So we're not here to sway you one way or another today. We're simply going to talk about what's similar at the parks, what's different, and what's unique to each coast in the hopes that it'll give you a good idea of which destination you'd like to prioritize or visit next.
Yeah, so first off, we're going to kick it off with a little bit of history.
Awesome.
So Disneyland Resort is the original resort, and it opened on July 17th, 1955. It's the only Disney resort that Walt was alive to see open to the public, which makes it really special in my opinion.
Absolutely.
It was a labor of love that took vision when no one else believed, but that was all Walt. He was a dreamer and a doer, and when Disneyland finally opened to the public, it was an instant hit, minus some initial growing pains, which comes with everything.
Yeah, 100%. The asphalt was still kind of soft, and it was such a hot day that women's heels were sinking in. They didn't have enough time to finish both the water fountains and the washrooms.
That's right.
So they asked Walt which is going to be, and obviously he chose washrooms, and then he was accused of not putting in water fountains and in the hopes of having people buy like pop and stuff.
Yes.
Which obviously wasn't true. It was just that they were literally down to the wire at the very last minute.
Yeah, but they got it all figured out. Disneyland was built in Anaheim at a time when it was out of the way, but that city very quickly expanded around it, and land became expensive and room for expansion just really quickly evaporated. Walt was looking to cast a wider net and reach a larger audience, and then they looked out east. Enter Walt Disney World.
Yeah, exactly. Disney bought a bunch of land under a false name to avoid the massive news coverage and jacked up prices that the Disney name would have obviously garnered. The location was strategically chosen, and much more land than would ever be necessary was purchased because Walt didn't want a repeat of Anaheim, okay? So he wanted an autonomous space where people could escape the day-to-day and truly be immersed in the magic and temporarily shut out from outside stressors. Plans for the new resort location were in full swing when Walt passed on December 15th, 1966, 5 years before Walt Disney World ever opened its doors to the world.
That's right. So his brother, Roy Disney, carried on his vision, and Magic Kingdom opened its gates on October 1st, 1971. Since then, Disney's leadership has changed hands many times. Disney's had its up and downs over the decades. Epcot opened its gates on October 1st, 1982, followed by Hollywood Studios, initially named Disney's MGM Studios, which opened on May 1st, 1989, followed by Animal Kingdom on April 22nd, 1998. And in that time and since, Disney has opened resorts in Paris, Tokyo, Hong Kong, and Shanghai. They've also launched a cruise line and currently operate 5 ships, with the 6th one having its first sail this year. Massive acquisitions were made too for Pixar, Marvel, and Lucasfilms, and they launched a streaming service.
Yep, Disney Plus, huge hit. Not profitable yet, but they are hoping to be profitable this year in 2024, so that remains to be seen.
Yeah.
Now that you know a little of the history of the parks, let's cover the similarities between the parks. So remember how I said there are diehard fans? Well, me just pointing out similarities and differences will undoubtedly fire some people up, okay? But regardless of which resort you prefer, they are Disney parks after all, and there are similarities, so here goes. The Disney difference, okay? So you've heard us say this before, but the magic you feel in a Disney park is felt on both coasts. The parks are so well done, the cast members are phenomenal, and the magic you feel when you enter Magic Kingdom on the East Coast and Disneyland on the West Coast is just wonderful.
Agreed.
On that same note, you'll notice major similarities between Disneyland and Magic Kingdom. They are designed in much the same way with the hub and spoke design, and some of the lands are also the same. You'll find Main Street USA, Fantasyland, Tomorrowland, Adventureland, and Frontierland in both parks. You'll also see similarities between California Adventure and Hollywood Studios. They're the closest parallels when you consider all parks, like Animal Kingdom and Epcot. They both have the Tower of Terror, although it's no longer Tower of Terror on the West Coast. It's now Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout. It wasn't a full ground up change. It was a retheme, essentially like Tiana's Bayou Adventure. It's the same ride system. It's essentially the same guts. They've just put a new face on it.
You bet. And you're going to find a lot of the same attractions like Space Mountain, Haunted Mansion, Pirates of the Caribbean, It's a Small World, Smuggler's Run, Rise of the Resistance, Tiana's Bayou Adventure, of course, Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, Peter Pan's Flight, Mad Tea Party, amongst others. You'll also have very similar classic entertainment like parades, nighttime spectaculars, character meet and greets, festivals, after-hours events, and hard-ticketed parties.
Yeah, absolutely. Long story short, at the end of the day, okay, they're both Disney resorts. They both have a lot to offer. And if you decide to vacation there, you'll certainly have a magical time, whether you're visiting the happiest place on earth or the most magical place on earth. Do you know which one is which?
I actually don't even know if I remember which one's which.
Yes, you do. Don't you?
Happiest place on earth is Disneyland.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I'm good.
There are other similarities between the parks, but that's the gist of it. Okay. So now let's go over some of the differences and intricacies that will help you decide if you'd like to prioritize one over the other for your first Disney trip, or decide if you'd like to make the trip to the other coast if you're used to visiting either the Florida or California parks. So at the risk of stating the obvious, they are on opposite sides of the country, okay? So one of my pet peeves is when people use Disney World and Disneyland interchangeably. Now, I won't call people out on this, okay? So if you're not a Disney fan, or if you've never visited the parks, or you just don't care about Disney parks more broadly, I can't expect you to know the difference. But the fact remains is that they are completely different destinations in completely different states and coastal regions. Aside from that, the most glaring difference, in my opinion, is the size. So we've said this before on the podcast because we cover Disney World much more frequently, but Disney World is massive, okay? The size of the city of San Francisco. It has 4 theme parks, Magic Kingdom, Epcot, Hollywood Studios, and Animal Kingdom, 2 water parks, Typhoon Lagoon and Blizzard Beach, over 25 resort hotels and DVC villas locations, and a massive shopping and entertainment center in Disney Springs, as well as an extensive transportation system to connect the whole, which includes buses, boats, monorails, and a Skyliner, which essentially is like a gondola system. They also have golf courses, mini golf, among many other activities.
It's a whole little world.
Absolutely. Massive space. Yeah. That was the intention. They wanted to be able to do that, be autonomous, be away from everything else. And it's truly an oasis. And you can get into the Disney bubble and truly be shut out from the outside world for however long you're there.
Absolutely. I agree. Disneyland, on the other hand, has 2 parks, 3 resort hotels, and the shopping and entertainment area named Downtown Disney. Comparatively, it is much smaller, way more compact than Disney World. When it comes to scale alone, Disney World is on a whole other level, like we've stated before.
Yeah, absolutely.
But on that note, Disney World is about 30 minutes or so from the Orlando International Airport and is surrounded by empty space, trees essentially. And essentially, there's no urban sprawl surrounding it. Like we said before, this was by design by Disney. Disneyland, however, is surrounded by the city of Anaheim, and roads, outside businesses, outside hotels, everything else in between is just on the other side of those attractions.
Yeah, absolutely. Literally, like right on the other side of the berm.
There's just a street that basically...
Yep, 100%. Now, with that said, being that Disney World is so big, you do have to either drive or rely on Disney transportation to get you to most places around property. So if you're staying at a Magic Kingdom area resort, for example, or an Epcot area resort, you can likely walk to Magic Kingdom, right, from those Magic Kingdom area resorts. Yep. But even if you're staying at the Grand Floridian, for example, or the Poly, you got to get all the way around 17's Lagoon, which is quite the trek.
Oh, it would be, yeah, I agree. It would be quite the trek. I'm just picturing it right now in my head. It would be a trek.
And like in the morning, it's not so bad when you're rearing to go and you're like excited. But after a long park day, you probably don't want to walk back there. The Epcot area resorts are pretty close to Epcot, and you can comfortably walk from those to Epcot's International Gateway entrance. So think Boardwalk, Yacht and Beach Club, even the Swan and Dolphin. It's all pretty close Epcot. Not as close to Hollywood Studios. To get to Hollywood Studios from there, you can walk it, but it's not super close. So something to keep in mind there. Outside of that, you'll have to take the monorail, the Skyliner, boats, or buses to get around, or drive. Yeah,
absolutely. Disneyland, on the other hand, like we said, is much more compact, and you can actually walk everywhere on property pretty comfortably. The distance between Disneyland and California Adventure is negligible. They are super close together, and just a few short minutes walk separates them. Downtown Disney is also very close and not far from the entrances to both parks. The resorts, the Grand Cal, Pixar Place, and Disneyland Hotel are also in that same area, and you can comfortably walk between the 3 resorts, the 2 parks, and downtown Disney. Not only that, but Anaheim is just outside the gates, so you actually have a ton of third-party hotels and restaurants in the area that are also very close walking distance to the parks. Everything is on a much more compact scale in Disneyland, which is a huge pro for some people, depending on what you're wanting out of your vacation.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want everything super close by, not ever have to worry about, getting in a car or even getting in any mode of transportation beyond your own 2 feet, you can absolutely do that at Disneyland.
Absolutely.
With that said, let's talk cost. Okay, so obviously a huge driving factor for most people when it comes to planning a vacation is the cost. Now, it doesn't matter which coast you intend to visit, visiting Disney is not cheap, okay? It's by no means a cost-effective trip.
So true.
However, there are certainly ways that you can save money and make it more cost-effective, right? So think staying off property, cooking some of your own food, bringing snacking to the parks are all good ways to save money. Having said that, let's draw a few comparisons. So for tickets, 4-day park hopper tickets beginning on March 4th, at Disney World would be $685 for adults and $667 for children. And 4-day park hopper tickets in Disneyland for the same time frame would be $490 for kids and $515 for adults. Noticeably cheaper in Disneyland. Having said that, Disney World has 4 theme parks, a lot more to offer when it comes to parks, resorts, dining options, so the extra cost may make sense to you. Not only that, but the park hopper option is not as necessary in my opinion in Disney World because it takes time to hop between the parks. It makes much more sense to purchase in Disneyland because the parks are so close to each other. Okay, so it's so easy to hop in between. I want to just spend some time emphasizing that. If you're hopping, for example, from Animal Kingdom to Magic Kingdom, we've said this before. I think we said it just a couple weeks ago, right? But you got to walk out of the park, wait for the bus, get on the bus, take the bus to Magic Kingdom, walk from the bus stop over there back into the park. The whole thing is going to take you it's a production. Yeah, 100%. Like 30 minutes on the very low end if you get super lucky with buses, being basically right there when they're about to leave, and an hour on the high end, right? So it takes time. Whereas you're leaving Disneyland to walk to California Adventure, in 5 minutes, you're going to be in the next park.
Yeah, absolutely.
So park hopper can really make a lot more sense over in Disneyland.
Agreed. And still on cost, if you want to stay in a Disney proper resort, you have many, many different options in Disney World. The different tiers, such as deluxe, moderate, and value, offer different options for different budgets that will appeal to more families and will accommodate a larger variety of families and travel parties. Disneyland, on the other hand, has 3 Disney proper resort hotels to choose from, and all of these range from expensive to super expensive.
Yeah, 100%. There is no cheap Disney proper resorts in Disneyland. Yeah.
The cheapest option is Pixar Place, which has prices that are on par with deluxe resorts at lower seasons in Disney World, and the Disneyland and Grand Californian are on pace or exceed even deluxe resort prices in Disney World. So it can be prohibitively expensive to stay on property in Disneyland, given the limited options and high prices.
Yeah, absolutely.
Having said that, because of Disneyland's location, there are so many third-party hotels around to choose from with much more reasonable prices that still offer great proximity to the parks. So that's definitely a good option. But these do take you out of the Disney bubble, so something to keep in mind depending on how important that is to you.
Yeah, 100%. When it comes to restaurants and dining options, so both resorts have a lot to offer. Over at Disneyland, you'll find much more quick service locations in both parks. So that's both in Disneyland and California Adventure than you'll find in the parks on the East Coast, so in Walt Disney World.
Yeah.
Disney World definitely has more table service, sit-down locations. Both resorts have fun snacks and exclusive and seasonal treats that are fun to try. Disneyland has some seriously good dining options, and many will tell you that they prefer the food offerings in Disneyland. And you can't deny, now don't necessarily disagree with that, there's a lot of iconic snacks in Disneyland.
Yeah.
However, you quite simply have more options at Walt Disney World, just in terms of like scale.
Yeah.
Again, with the 4 parks, Disney Springs, which has a ton of dining options itself, and the 25 plus resorts, which all have dining options themselves, okay, which some really phenomenal restaurants.
Sanaa.
Yeah. Sanaa, Ohana, Storybook Dining at Artist Point,
so many.
Topolino's, there's just so many, just off the top of my head. Disney World on that sense just has more to offer, but that's not to say that Disneyland can't hold its own. Okay, that's not what I'm saying. You'll definitely find a ton of good eats at both resorts. So I'm split on this one. Okay, so it's a pretty subjective thing. I think you can find restaurants and snacks that you'll absolutely love and will become instant favorites on both coasts.
Yeah, I think it's a win either way. You just look at it. Both have very good options for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
So next up, let's talk attractions. So earlier we mentioned that a lot of attractions that you'll find in Disneyland, you'll find a lot of them in Disney World as well. However, even among attractions of the same name, there are actually significant differences between these attractions. I don't know if it's because it's the original or because the attractions are slightly different and oftentimes in subtly superior in many ways.
Yep.
The edge for attraction goes to Disneyland. It's crazy, but it does.
Yep.
And let's explore that a little further.
Yeah. So Space Mountain, for example. So the ride itself is very similar, but a couple of key differences.
Huge differences in my opinion.
Yeah. So in Disneyland, you're side by side in the ride vehicle. So it's wider, whereas in Walt Disney World, it's single seating from front to back. And the ride is also much smoother in Disneyland, whereas it can be pretty jerky in Walt Disney World.
It's so jerky in Walt Disney World. Unfortunately, it really is.
I know. I don't know if it's because I'm getting older or it's just, I don't know what it is.
I never get motion sickness on rides, and that one just makes my tummy a little funky.
And we'll always ride it. It's Space Mountain. We'll always ride it, but
it's classic.
It definitely feels a little bit more rough.
I'm excited to ride
Walt Disney World.
The Disneyland one in August.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Another one is It's a Small World. While the ride, though, is virtually identical when you're riding it, the front of the attraction is actually far more superior in Disneyland. The facade designed by Imagineer Mary Blair, the iconic Mary Blair, and the iconic smiling clock just outside of it. And I find the front of the attraction is actually quite beautiful.
It really is.
Yeah.
The whole thing just looks phenomenal. When you compare it to Disneyland's version, it's not that, or Disney World, sorry. It's not that ours is not
boring.
Yeah, it's just, when you look at the front of Disneyland's, it's just, it's made for that.
It draws you to it.
100%. It's just beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. So Disneyland's version gets really serious Christmas treatment with thousands of lights. When the sun goes down, it's quite the sight to see. And they also completely deck out the interior in lights, and the end result is just a completely different experience, which is actually quite exciting because we all know how that ride goes, right? Yep. So when you can change it up a little bit, it's really fun.
Yeah, 100%.
So this is a classic attraction. We ride it every time we're in Walt Disney World, and we find that the front of the attraction is far superior in Disneyland. They win.
Yeah, 100%. Sure. And the ride, like we said, the ride itself, it's a boat. It takes you around, the different countries. Yeah, exactly. But it's just the front of the facade and the Christmas treatment that they get over there on the West Coast.
And the way it goes, I think when you're outside too on the boat a little bit, it's just, it draws you in more. Yeah,
100%. Pirates of the Caribbean in Disneyland has the New Orleans style facade with a queue that's mainly outdoors. Disney World's queue is all indoors and is quite extensive. So I think the queue wins in Walt Disney World.
Yes.
The biggest difference is the ride length. Okay. So while it's about 8 minutes in Walt Disney World, it's almost double that at over 15 minutes in Disneyland with an extra drop to boot. Okay. So the edge goes to Disneyland for this one as well.
I'm kind of excited just for that drop itself to go in August.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
Haunted Mansion, first off, they are housed in completely different looking buildings. So Disneyland is a New Orleans style mansion, while Disney World is kind of a Gothic style mansion. Personally, we prefer the look of the Disneyland version. In the stretching room in Walt Disney World, the walls and ceilings move up. And in Disneyland, it's an actual elevator and you move down, which is very exciting.
Yep.
So not better or worse, just different, and a result of the limited space in Disneyland.
Yep.
And the ride itself is very similar, and Walt Disney World now features the Hatbox Ghost as well. Where Disneyland's version shines is before the Halloween season each year, Haunted Mansion gets a Nightmare Before Christmas makeover.
Absolutely.
Which appeals to a lot of people, I think.
100%.
It's a very fun and actually a really simple way to completely change a classic attraction. They simply don't do this in Walt Disney World. So again, edge to Disneyland.
Yeah, 100%. And it's not that Walt Disney World's version is not good. The ride itself, again, super similar.
Super classic, super awesome.
I love the music. I love the scene, Pepper's Ghost and the whole shebang. Like, it's great. Having said that, the Nightmare Before Christmas, just the look of the New Orleans style house, I just like that.
Yep.
I love it. Agreed. I wish they did it in Walt Disney World, to be honest. I think it would be a huge hit. I think people would love it. So, yeah.
Agreed.
Disney, I hope that one day you'll bring it to the East Coast. Yeah. Indiana Jones and Dinosaur at Animal Kingdom. Okay, so now you may ask, why in the world are you comparing these two attractions? Well, long story short, it's essentially the exact same ride system. Okay, so the only difference is the IP. So Dinosaur sends you back in time to hunt for a missing dino, and Indiana Jones sends you on a wild adventure. The edge goes again to Disneyland. Okay, so now this is very subjective to us, but I just don't much care for Dinosaur. I don't think you do either. Okay,
it's not my favorite. I'll ride it every time, but it's not my favorite.
The storyline in the ride is super jerky. And it's not that it's not jerky in Indiana Jones. It is, but I much prefer Indiana Jones and the entire theming of the attraction in Disneyland. I know some people love Dinosaur. It just doesn't do it for me.
I can totally see them changing Dinosaur to Indiana Jones one day.
Yeah,
especially if they do a whole re-theme of Dinoland.
Yeah, so if you guys aren't aware, they pitched that at the last D23 event as a Blue Sky project. So it's not confirmed that this is even happening. And if it is happening, it's likely, a few years in the future, but essentially complete rehaul of Dinoland USA. It'd be completely changed. They teased a potential Moana or Zootopia and the Madrigals. Encanto. Yeah, thank you. So all potentials for, a re-theme of Dinoland USA. So could we see Indiana Jones in that kind of theme? Yeah, absolutely. I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Tower of Terror. So Twilight Zone, Tower of Terror is one of our ultimate favorite attractions of any theme park, our kids included. We just love it. We love everything about it, from the pre-show to the loading of the ride vehicle and to the attraction itself. We just love it. Yeah.
One of my favorite things is when, so you get loaded right by row, whatever, 6, 4, 2, and then on the other side. And then you put your seatbelt on and everybody hands up, everybody their hands up. Nobody, I give it a check. Yeah. They have you tug on the yellow strap, but either way, they always will do something, like in each cast member does something a little different, but silly, like, one more thing, and then they'll close doors and then they'll swipe their hand along the window.
Yeah, we like it.
Either they'll do little things like that.
The cast members do a good job with that
100%. One of my favorite things.
For sure. And Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout replaced the Tower of Terror in Disneyland back in 2017, much to the chagrin of the original fans of this attraction.
Yep.
But having said that, the ride is actually one of the most popular rides at Disneyland Resort. So clearly, many people are not that upset about it. They rode it once probably and are like, oh, okay, this works. Yep. We're huge fans of Guardians of the Galaxy, so we're not mad about that at all. Plus, if we ever feel like riding the classic rendition, it's safe and sound in Hollywood Studios. I don't think they're ever going to change that because it's Hollywood Studios.
Yeah, 100%.
So we don't think any one of them is better than the other. It's just completely different, which is actually kind of fun. I like that they're both very different.
Yeah, it's kind of cool that you can essentially experience the same ride system on either coast, and it's a completely different experience.
Yeah, but for like nostalgia alone and just the feel of walking through it, we got to give a leg up to the Walt Disney World version.
100%. Yeah. Like Lucy said, it's one of our favorites. And
our family favorite, really.
100%. I absolutely love that attraction. Everything about it. Aside from this, many of the rides are different in very subtle ways or exactly the same, such as Rise of the Resistance, Smuggler's Run, Peter Pan's Flight, Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. I realize the queue is different here, right? But the ride itself is essentially the same.
Yeah, the same.
So Walt Disney World's version is in the Grauman Theater, and Disneyland's version is in Toontown.
Which makes sense. It's so perfectly fit
100%.
there. Yeah.
And then there's the rides that are completely different in both resorts. Okay, so you might think that Disneyland has less attractions since there's only 2 parks, but that's not the case. They actually have about the same amount of rides. Disney World has many more shows and extra experiences, like the World Showcase at Epcot and the safaris at Animal Kingdom, or the shows in these parks like Indiana Jones Spectacular, Beauty and the Beast Live on Stage, Festival of the Lion King. Like, I could go on and on. In the end, regardless of how you feel about the attractions in the parks, there's just simply more to do and see in Walt Disney World. Having said that, when it comes to attractions alone, Disneyland is rocking it.
100%. I would agree. Next topic is Genie Plus. So before we get into the specifics of Genie Plus, we want to quickly mention that on January 9th, Walt Disney World removed the park pass reservation requirement for date-based tickets, and all-day park hopping has returned. And as of this recording, park pass reservations are still required in Disneyland, and park hopping is still set at 11 a.m.
Yep, absolutely. So those... that could change very quickly.
Oh, yeah.
We're recording this now, and, next month and a month from now, that could completely change. They could get rid of park pass reservations for day-based tickets, and they could bring back all-day park hopping. Just, keep your ear to the ground for that. We'll obviously update here on the podcast as well if that ever changes. But as of this recording, that is still the case in Disneyland.
Yeah.
When it comes to Genie Plus, it's very similar in both resorts, okay? So with key differences. So as of this recording, Walt Disney World Genie Plus can only be purchased beginning at midnight on the day of your park visit. You used to be able to purchase it for your entirety of your stay, but that's not the case. That changed like a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
The price fluctuates per park and per day, and you can make your first selection at 7 a.m. and every 120 minutes thereafter once the park has opened. In Disneyland, you can purchase Genie Plus in advance with your tickets like you used to be able to do in Walt Disney World when it first launched.
Which is kind of nice because then you can pay for it ahead of time.
Not only that, it was only $15.
Yes, exactly.
So I do miss that. The cost in advance in Disneyland is $30 per day per ticket. Single day purchases in Disneyland start at $30 and can fluctuate also based on demand. Okay, so if you didn't purchase it in advance, you can only purchase it after you've entered the park. And unlike Walt Disney World, you can only make your first selection once you've scanned into the park and not at 7 a.m. like you do in Walt Disney World. Okay, so that could be a pro for some people, meaning you don't have to wake up at 7 a.m. if you want to make a Lightning Lane selection. Once you enter the park is when you can make your first one. Now, that's the other side of it. You don't have to wake up at 7 to make your first selection, but I find that it takes a bit away from the magic because when you're first scanning in and you should be, walking down Main Street, spotting the castle, focusing on the experience, you're kind of in your phone trying to make your first Lightning Lane selection. I mean, you don't have to do that, but the tendency is to do that. And,
you're kind of missing out on that initial moment,
Yeah, exactly.
Another important difference is that there are actually more Genie Plus attractions in Magic Kingdom alone than there are in Disneyland and California Adventure put together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so as long as you have park hopper tickets in Disneyland, you can make Lightning selections in both parks, assuming you have a park hopper ticket. In Walt Disney World, you need a park hopper ticket and have purchased Disney Genie Plus for multiple parks specifically. Overall, I think that Genie Plus is more simple to use in Disneyland.
Yep, 100%.
It's pretty obvious. And also, attractions tend to be available for longer periods of time. It's a little bit more involved in Walt Disney World, and most popular attractions usually book up entirely for the entire day in the first few minutes after 7 a.m. It can be quite intense.
Yeah, 100%. And this is speculation on my part because it's anecdotal, but I think that Disneyland is more of a locals park. So
totally,
locals tend to buy Genie Plus or Lightning Lanes less often. So
because they can go
often. Exactly. And because there's less attractions, I think less people find it appealing. So it feels less competitive in Disneyland than it does in Disney World. If you're trying to book, Remy's, Slinky Dog Dash, any of them, top really, attractions right at 7 a.m., if you don't book at 7 a.m., there's a good chance you might not get it.
You're up into the late afternoons, if not at all.
Yeah, exactly. So definitely.
We're really going to get a good sense of this in August, being able to see the difference between the two parks for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
The two
to have
resorts.
A clear-cut comparison, absolutely. Yeah. Experiences. So in terms of experiences, like I said earlier, you have parades, nighttime spectaculars, meet and greets on both coasts. Okay, so it's Disney, so expect that. There are also special ticketed events like after-hours events and parties. So, for example, Magic Kingdom has Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party, and Disneyland has the Oogie Boogie Bash, right? Both are Halloween parties. They both have fireworks over the castle. And on that note, I can't believe I haven't mentioned this yet. Don't come at me, okay? I don't want to take anything away from Sleeping Beauty's castle at Disneyland, but it is significantly smaller and less impressive than Cinderella's castle at Magic Kingdom.
I think most people would agree with you on that.
Yeah, so I know some people will hate us for saying that because it's not the original, and I get it, okay? But I just find that Cinderella's castle at Magic Kingdom just has a bit more of that wow factor.
Yeah, I agree.
So don't get me wrong, they still both hit, right in the feels, but I'll just leave it at that.
Because we're such big Walt Disney the Man fans, to know that he had a hand in all of that just makes Disneyland so exciting in that sense.
For sure. It's special because...
Especially the castle, because he literally envisioned that.
Yep.
But
and he walked through it, right?
Yeah.
He actually
He was there for it all.
He was there like in Florida at like its inception, but he was never there for opening. Walt walked the streets of Disneyland, right? There's
an apartment there that he used to stay in and stuff.
Yeah, 100%, right?
But
so you can't take that away.
The castle wins in Disney World.
Yeah, agreed. Disneyland also has Fantasmic, which is actually held at Hollywood Studios in Walt Disney World. California Adventure has World of Color, which is a super impressive light and water show. One thing to note is that the nighttime spectaculars are not held as frequently in Disneyland. That's true, so during less busy times, they won't be every night. So keep an eye on those calendars to make sure you don't miss it while you're there. By contrast, barring some inclement weather, there are nighttime spectaculars every night in all of the Walt Disney World parks except for Animal Kingdom because of the animals, 365 days a year.
Yeah, 100%. There's always something going on there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Last thing we're going to say is this. All things being equal and setting aside the fact that we've been to Disney World lots of times, we find that planning Disneyland tends to be a bit more simple. It's smaller and the logistics are a touch less involved. Do we think that's enough of a hang up to favor land over world? Definitely not.
Yeah, no, for sure not.
But we can definitely see the appeal of a bit more simplicity in the planning stages, especially if this is your first trip or if planning trips kind of makes you a little bit nervous. Just something we've noticed personally, and maybe you'll disagree if you've planned both. But having said that, if you do consider the fact that we have planned Walt Disney World trips many times over, and now we're basically on autopilot when it comes to planning it.
100%.
I don't find a difference at all. Do you?
No, and that's because we've planned Walt Disney World a lot of times. When we first planned our first two trips, there was a lot of stress involved. There was a lot of unknowns. But now that we've
lots of research.
Yeah, exactly. Now that we've been several times and we've put all these things into practice and we know what we're doing, we know where we're going, we know all of those details, it feels very comfortable. Yeah, right?
But planning a Disneyland trip definitely, hands down, is a lot calmer of a vibe.
Yeah, and that, I don't know if that's because we're, I guess, seasoned Disney vets now. Yeah. Or because it's just,
less pressure almost.
It is less pressure. I think that is. It's just a little bit easier to plan. So this is not an exhaustive list of all the difference between Disneyland and Walt Disney World, okay? But it should give you a pretty good idea of the main differences between the two resorts. With that said, which one is right for you? In my opinion, it depends on what you're looking for out of your vacation, okay? So if you have a week and you're wanting to see and do as much Disney as possible in that time, then Walt Disney World can be a really good option. Between the 4 theme parks, 25 plus resorts, Disney Springs, water parks, you can easily make a full week out of your Walt Disney World trip.
Agreed.
If you have less time or you're wanting to have a taste of Disney for a long weekend, for example, or maybe you have really young kids and you're a little intimidated by how large Walt Disney World is, then maybe Disneyland is a better option for your first trip. Or maybe you've been to Walt Disney World a few times and now you want to experience something different, then maybe a trip to the West Coast is exactly what you need, or vice versa. Maybe you're a California local and you want to go see what's different in Walt Disney World.
At the end of the day, we don't think you can go wrong with a trip to either resort. Both Walt Disney World and Disneyland are magical. Both are a cut above in our opinion, and they have cast members that make it magical and genuinely care about your experience. Yeah. So wherever you choose to vacation, I know you're going to have a great time.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. With that said, thank you so much for joining us today to talk Disneyland and Disney World. Okay, so if you haven't already, find us on Instagram at letsgo.todisney for more tips and Disney fun. We're also on Facebook. Our page there is just Let's Go to Disney, common spelling. Also, if you're not subscribed to the podcast, we'd sure appreciate it if you took the time to do that. And if you can find a time to drop us a rating and review, it would certainly be greatly appreciated. It helps us reach more listeners, and that's why we started this podcast, to help people have great Disney vacations.
With that being said, we hope you have a great day, and we'll see you real soon.